Thank you for joining us, participants in this session. The theme for our event is moving from rhetoric to implementable action. We are delighted to have you here with us today as UN Habitat, as we mark a significant milestone whereby we have just launched yesterday UN Habitat's flagship report, the World Cities Report, entitled Cities and Climate Action. The World Cities Report of UN Habitat is published every 2 years as a key reference in the field of urban development. It is UN Habitat's flagship publication through which we aim to shape and influence policy narratives and action. Indeed, it is UN Habitat's most read and most sought after product. This year's theme on cities and climate change is urgent and it is timely. We know that cities are at the forefront and front lines of the climate change challenge. We are seeing the devastating effects of climate change across our cities, across our continents. We have witnessed only over the last few days the effects of flooding in Valencia, Spain. In Chennai, India, we have witnessed the heavy rainfall that has overwhelmed infrastructure and many other examples. These are not isolated incidents. We do observe a growing global trend. Today, we are privileged to have a distinguished panel and a distinguished set of experts and leaders in their respective field that are here to share with us their thoughts and their reflections on the theme of cities and climate action. Before we delve into the panel discussion, I would like us, and I would like the tech team, to once again play the video message of our Executive Director, Ana Claudia Rosbach, and her brief remarks at this time as we launch the World Cities Report. Can we have the tech team to play the video, please? Okay, I understand that we may need to move forward, and it was played earlier on and many of you have seen it, but those that are just joining us have not seen it. Perhaps we'll find another way of sharing this video. So as I said, we have an excellent, distinguished panel of speakers, leaders, experts, who will share with us their different perspectives on the matter of cities and climate action. We have Dr. David Dodman, General Director of the Institute for Housing and Urban Development, Erasmus University, Rotterdam. And he's also a coordinating lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report on the same subject matter. We have Honorable Mayor of Banjul, Gambia, Ms. Rohi Malik Low. We also have Professor Carol Archer, Professor of Urban Planning and Public Policy at the University of Technology, Kingston, Jamaica, who is also, or has been, a member of the advisory board that has worked with UN Habitat in the preparation of this report. We are also glad to have here with us Mr. Hannes Lagrelius, who is a program specialist for inclusive and accessible urban development at the World Blind Union, Toronto, Canada. Distinguished members of the panel, I would like to start with Honorable Mayor Low. And we'd like to hear from you. How do the findings of the report resonate with your responsibilities and mandates as Mayor of Banjul? And how do you see the findings of the report supporting your own programs and efforts in responding to climate change? Honorable Mayor.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. It is my pleasure to be in the midst of professors. I'm sure today I will learn a lot. Politicians versus professors. Anyway, first and foremost, let me take it to context, and then I can dwell a little bit about how it helps Banjul. When we talk about climate change, the first thing that comes in mind are cities, women, and indeed children, because they are the most affected by climate change. And in the context of Banjul, my city, Banjul, is on the sea level. Anybody who knows Banjul will tell you it's the happiest city in West Africa, but also very vulnerable when it comes to climate issues. We have floods almost every year. But then, what comes in mind is, who are those at the forefront when there is flooding? Mayors, everybody knows, we don't have the resources. And if I talk about resources here, I'm trying to talk about what the report addresses. Resources are not only money. Let us not mistake resources with money. How about capacity? These are things that my city is looking for. Indeed, funding is very, very important. But how about those who are very, very vulnerable? I'm sorry, Madam Professor, indeed, the report talks about those who are very, very vulnerable, directly or indirectly. When we talk about women and climate issues, indeed, there is no argument. This is a clear cut that they are the most vulnerable. When there is drought, we suffered, because most of the African women has their earnings from farming or from gardening. So when there is flooding, they suffer. When there is drought, the same thing. So we cannot differentiate climate change, talk about climate change without addressing the issue of those who are the most vulnerable. So, but again, you cannot talk about climate change without talking about funding. My city, Banjul, has tried as much as possible to listen, as I borrow the words from Guterres, who says, listen to cities. And who are the cities? He's trying to say, listen to the people. And I want to take this opportunity to thank UN Habitat for at least implementing the VRR in my city. That is the local volunteer review, which is also very, very important, because with that, you happen to have data that gives you at least a genesis of how you can also help to mitigate climate issues. Banjul does not contribute a lot when it comes to emission, but we are suffering a lot. So those who are lobbying for monies to be given for the vulnerable cities, I think I am not saying that they are not doing a very good job, but that money is not filtering down to the developing countries or developing cities like Banjul. We need to be part of the national cake or the global cake. We are also a city with communities, with people. So we are also part of those who are entitled to have monies from the climate funding. So, but are we seeing it? Maybe if it is at the national level, but when is it coming down to the local level? Before it comes down, almost everybody, or almost the whole city, is already gone. So we have to try to go back to the table, sit down, and look at it in another perspective. And this is why the future of the pact, we are saying as local government that we don't want to be only implementers. We want to sit at the round table where policies are made. And these policies will also help cities to address the issues of climate change. So, Madam Moderator, I can keep on talking until tomorrow because, number one, I am a woman that is affected by climate change. Number two, I am a mayor taking care of a capital city. Number three, I am a mayor of a city that is below sea level. So you can see how climate change is very close to my heart. And also indeed a mother. And we all know that children are vulnerable when it comes to climate change. So ladies and gentlemen, I will hand over the baton to the professors and we listen what they will say. Maybe the money is coming to Banjul so we can solve our problems.
Thank you, thank you. Round of applause. Thank you, Honorable Mayor, for bringing some very, very crucial points to the conversation. Clarity around what this means for a city that is below sea level, that is struggling with the challenges on a day-to-day basis. This is the connection we want to discuss today. Report that has been published, so what, when it comes to cities, to communities, to our respective areas of responsibility. And thank you for highlighting two crucial points. Funding, a part of the global and national cake, needs to get to the local level, and those that are most vulnerable, especially women. Thank you so much for that, Honorable Mayor. I now turn to Dr. David Dodman, who has been with us at UN Habitat in the drafting of this report. He is also a lead author for the IPCC. David, share with us your reflections, especially in terms of how this resonates with the climate science, the work of the IPCC, and the change that this can bring.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Edlam, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for setting the scene so wonderfully for this session. I'm really delighted that I've been able to be part of the World Cities report. I think it really reflects a strong vision on the part of UN Habitat. It reflects also an incredible amount of diligent work from the other authors, many of whom are in the audience today. I think the product that we have here is really fantastic. I think there are some elements of it that are highly significant, and I'll try and bring those up a little bit. And I think it also has some implications going forward. The first reason why I think it's significant is around the positive findings that it brings. In the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, we are driven by the science. We're driven by understanding what evidence has been produced and assessing it. In this report, it's been driven by the needs of cities, of city actors of different kinds, and trying to produce something which is relevant there. And it does that by having a very detailed understanding of climate action, not just of climate science or of the climate problems, but a mature understanding of climate action, a mature assessment of the potential and limits of specific actions and how these fit in within the broader development priorities that all cities are going to face. It's significant because it engages explicitly with issues of informality, justice, and equity. And it does this in a way both because there is a moral imperative to address the needs of most vulnerable people, but also because there is a practical recognition that without people being a meaningful part of the problem of addressing problems and finding solutions, the solutions are not going to be met. And it does it by taking a global approach. It looks at urban areas as systems, the systems which exist within cities and that are interconnected and need to be dealt with in a joined-up way, but also the way in which cities are interdependent within urban systems nationally and also globally. But there are also some challenges that remain, and the report doesn't shy away from identifying those challenges. there's a very telling statement that the level of action to date does not adequately reflect the severity of the threat that is being addressed. It's very clear that some of the key actual actions on informality, including the commitment of finances to large-scale informal settlement upgrading, particularly community-led informal settlement upgrading, that the resources that go in that direction remain very limited. It became also very clear that there are a range of other key trends that are taking place very rapidly around things like AI and electrification, and that our climate responses don't keep track with that, and that there are many unmet needs, for example, around sanitation, where we still need to be engaging at the same time as addressing climate change. It'd be interesting to hear the Honourable Mayor's reflection on this as well, because there's a very strong message here about the significance of mayors and city government. But I'm also concerned that there are so many things that we're placing on the shoulders of this group of people. We're asking them to improve their own creditworthiness, their own source revenue. We're asking them to operate in multi-level governance frameworks. We're asking them to coordinate multiple stakeholder networks. We're asking them to be proactive in the implementation of infrastructure. And so there's this wide range of things where there's action needed, but perhaps not yet the resources. Last set of comments then on perhaps report used. At the press launch yesterday, somebody made a comment of the report being very valuable as a step towards things like the upcoming IPCC special report on cities, or towards the new post-2030 agenda. And I think that the report definitely does have value in moving towards these upcoming agendas. But more than that, I think it has relevance for action right now. The current programs that are being implemented on urban planning and design, on nature-based solutions, on social protection that meets the needs of vulnerable groups, on infrastructure of different kinds. All of these are things that are requiring action right now. All of these are things that are being acted on right now. And the report, I think, gives some very clear guidance on these present actions and how they can be done, particularly in a way that is more people-centered, a way that incorporates equity and justice concerns. So there are some very positive and mutually reinforcing messages. Good climate action strengthens cities socially, ecologically, economically. Good urban actions and enabling cities facilitates better climate action. And I'm really happy that we have this report to guide us in this way.
Thank you so much for those questions, which I actually feel complemented some of the issues that Honourable Mayor was bringing up. You did pose a question around, are we asking too much of local and regional governments? Honourable Mayor will come back to you perhaps to reflect a bit later on. But your point on the report being focused on action. Sorry about that. Yes, so that was really very important, that it's action focused and it's on action now, and also the complementarities that you highlighted between good climate action and good urban action. I think that was very important, and also for highlighting the question of informal settlements and slums, which is really at the heart of the equity and justice questions that this report is raising very, very clearly. With that, I would now like to move on to Hannes, who has also been with us in the journey of the preparation. Hannes, could you tell us, please, how are people affected by climate change in diverse ways? What are the specific needs and priorities that we need to take into account from your perspective as we consider better climate action in cities?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. First of all, I just want to extend a big thank you from the World Blind Union for having us as part of the process to provide expertise and resources to support an increased inclusion of persons with disabilities in discussions, but also knowledge production on cities and climate. For organizations of persons with disabilities, we are commonly not invited to be part of these types of processes across all levels, so a big thank you so much for that. Some reflections on the report and in relation to inclusion of persons with disabilities. First of all, as my colleague was also talking about, that this is a major step, we believe, in the process for the next special report by the IPCC. We appreciate the efforts made to break silos, to break barriers, and really taking this system an integral approach, including, on how do we actually include diverse groups in the process, because it's absolutely necessary, also when we localize action. At the World Wine Union, we are committed to advanced just climate action and ensure the full and effective implementation of the rights of persons with disabilities, who we advocate for together with our colleagues and partners. Of course, also in relation to disaster risk reduction. Our work is framed by the multiple global agendas and the New Urban Agenda, underpinned by the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, putting government to account on legal obligations. Edlam, you asked me what are the impacts of climate change on persons with disabilities, and it is widely known that persons with disabilities are amongst the groups most disproportionately impacted in all their diversity, both by the effects of climate change, but also indirect effects of climate change. Should I change mic? The lives, homes, health, food security are under immediate threat and at greater risk. As strongly highlighted in the report, persons with disabilities are more likely to be left out in emergency situation, or even die during disasters. In our experience, hello? Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay. This is why many times, due to inaccessible urban environments, lack of access to transportation, safe evacuation, and shelters, fostering inclusive urban resilience from the planning and design phases is absolutely critical if we want to save lives and ensure that communities are able to respond to human rights. There are global commitments and human rights obligations to address accessibility barriers and discrimination. However, it is still largely ignored in climate action. And just to highlight one example of this is the total absence of references to disability inclusion or persons with disabilities in most of the NDCs. We see a few references, most of them are very general, not providing sufficient framework for action by the member states. Therefore, there needs to be better accountability across all governance levels to ensure that urban mitigation, adaptation, and finance strategies are truly human rights based. Cities do provide cities provide a lot of employment opportunities. The problem is that persons with disabilities often face challenges to secure decent and secure jobs. Even during transition periods, as we are currently in, the transitions towards a green economy provides emerging labor market opportunities for persons with disabilities to play a role in contributing and benefiting from this transition. As stressed in the report, this also requires well-resourced and more robust social protection programs. Our community is often excluded in climate action, disaster risk reduction strategies, as I mentioned before, developed at national and local levels. This severely impacts how our human rights as persons with disabilities and our requirements are considered and safeguarded. during immediate and protracted crises. As stressed in the report, and I want to quote this because it's one of my favorite quotes in the new report, is that with the right will in place and working together with all stakeholders, including the most marginalized communities, national and local governments, can greatly enhance urban resilience while delivering a wider agenda of social inclusion and environmental justice. The more equitable city is, the better placed will be to withstand the impacts of climate change. The report stressed the importance of localizing assessments, and of course this means engaging with communities to develop solutions with communities to lower risk and vulnerability. I realize I'm speaking for too long, so I will try to skip a few of my incredibly important points, but give me a second. We are at a point now where we not only have to design for the planet, but also for and with the people. Ensuring sustainability is not only to make infrastructure more green or future-proof it, but also about making sure that infrastructure is inclusive and provide accessibility for everyone. To support this, adopting inclusive design approaches and ensuring that accessibility is embedded in infrastructure, finance strategies, and planning alongside sustainability priorities. In doing so, you're not only ensure that new or adapted infrastructure is resilient and sustainable, but also inclusive for all, including persons with disabilities, women, and all the intersecting groups. Because it's all about people, it's all about planets, and we all want to benefit from living happy, healthy life in livable environments with cherished diversity. So
Thank you so much, Hannes. And again, I think following through from the thoughts shared by the previous panelists around who is vulnerable, who is most vulnerable, what do the vulnerabilities look like, and ensuring that policy responses are equally diverse and comprehensive to address those vulnerabilities, whether it's in terms of people living with disability, women, those living in informal settlements, children. I think we heard all of these coming up, so your points really reinforced this very well. Professor Archer, I'm coming to you now. Professor Archer has also been with us in this journey. Share with us what this means for you, for your work, and for the priority issues that you consider to be actionable.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. And let me also recognize my colleagues who were part of the advisory team. If I may, I would describe us as the staff in the kitchen preparing this wonderful meal, but you don't get to see how the meal is prepared. Yes, you don't get to see the things that would be washed and prepped and then come out to you in this beautiful, well-documented, useful text. So I want to share with you the many hats we wear, and certainly I wear when I looked at the book, preparing the book that will be that is being shared with you. One, as an educator, I train urban planners. I was very particular about the language, the accessibility of the language. And I think that you can all agree, if you haven't seen it yet, I can assure you that the language, we were very mindful that the language was accessible to all. We were also very mindful that not just the language, but the presentation was very accessible to the persons who are like the audience. And we saw, certainly for me, I saw the local government officials, decision makers as one of our primary audience. And we know from time to time when we have these reports, you get them and you put them on the shelf, and they look very beautiful. But being mindful of that, if you look at the various chapters, particularly, I want to draw your attention to the chapter that deals with urban planning and policy. That I believe that, yes, that's chapter 5. And so for all of us here who are policymakers, who are decision makers, I really want to draw your attention to that chapter, because if you're preparing your national urban plan, if you are preparing your comprehensive community development plan, this really provides the roadmap for which you can use to develop your plan. Also, and I must make a point of this, when we reviewed the submission before it gets to this stage, I think probably we were a little bit demanding on the data and the type of data and the currency of the data that informs the various studies and the case studies and the vignettes that you will see in the document. So you will see examples from the developing world, from the small cities, vulnerable cities. So we were very mindful that we use examples that persons can draw from as they seek to develop, whether it's electric vehicle policies. We used examples, I believe, from Pakistan. We looked at how the issues of sanitation and solid waste management, and we drew from very current, real examples. So I submit to you that based on the fact that you had a team being mindful of the document being usable, being applied, being something not that you rest your coffee cup on, but something that you take with you when you're negotiating with the minister or you're negotiating with the lending agency, and point out to them that what you're requesting, your proposal, is in keeping with data provided in the World Cities Report, or is in keeping with the framework outlined in the World Cities Report. So it is a very useful document, and there was a team of us that ensure that the document was useful. So I congratulate the team, the technical team that worked behind the scene, so that now you have a very comprehensive document. Thank you.
Thank you. Round of applause. Thank you so much. I think this was extremely valuable in answering the question that I'm sure everybody has on their minds, which is another report. What does it mean for me? Will it make a difference in my line of work? I just want to check in. How many of you work on climate change related issues, directly, indirectly? So most of you do. So as Professor Archer highlighted, the report has a use for everybody in a very practical way. So she has just invited you to look at the report, to use the report in your various engagements as you move on after the World Urban Forum. I want to recognize that today in the audience we have a number of distinguished participants, but one that we know of certainly, following from Professor Archer, is that we are honored to have the Mayor of Kingston here with us. Is that correct? Yes, Honorable Mayor, you're welcome. I just want to invite you, if you'd like to just say anything related to the report, now or later. I am offering the opportunity. We'll come back to you perhaps. I want to break up the flow so that you interact with the panel. We have a distinguished panel. They would like to hear from you. What are your questions vis-a-vis the report? What would you like to hear from them, know from them? So we'll take a round of questions and then we'll come back to you. So the floor is open. You've heard the panel. The report is out. What are you thinking? What are your questions? The floor is open. Please. Can we have a mic over there? And let us know who you are, and if your question is specific to a specific panelist. Switch it on.
You hear well? Yes. Okay. Good morning. Hello? Okay. Good morning. I'm Paula Ciclari. I'm from Chile. I'm from Latin America. David, nice to meet you personally. Edlam, nice to meet you personally as well. Well, this is a...
Perhaps my mic is better. Can we just take this one?
Okay, now? Okay, perfect. I just want to know if the report, unfortunately I haven't seen the report yet, but if the report touched the link between inequalities and climate change in urban settings, thinking on Latin America, no? Mostly.
A great question for the authors of this report, but also for all of you to reflect on inequalities. I think you touched upon it already, but we'll hear from all the panelists. Happy to take one more question. Please, go ahead. Colleagues, can we have a mic? Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lucy from London Interdisciplinary School. We're a university that's based around interdisciplinary learning. So there seemed to be a theme of wanting to break down barriers and this need for a systems-wide approach. So I'm really curious to hear from each of you about the idea of preposterous thinking and needing to think outside the box, and how that might have fed into the report, and maybe where you can direct us to look for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Another excellent question, thinking outside the box, ideas that are outside the box. Thank you for raising that. I'm sure the panelists have a few ideas on that as well. I want to start by the lead author and lead coordinator of the World Cities Report, Ben Arima, to say something on the question of inequality, if you would like to. Please also, Ben, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Ben Arima. I'm fortunate to coordinate the World Cities Report, and many of the colleagues here, we work together, and I think the World Cities Report is a reflection of what they have done. Yes, the issue of inequality pervades the report. If you look at chapter 4, inequality at various aspects, whether it's a level of income in terms of inadequate access to resources. Inequality is exacerbated by climate change, and those that are most vulnerable are highly unequal, or they are affected so much more by climate change. They do not have the resources, they do not have social network programs to support them. The issue of closely related to inequality is the issue of informality. Again, because we know that informal settlements also are a reflection of inequality. So the issue of informal settlement also comes in the report. The report clearly shows with data from countries that inequality and vulnerability to climate change are highly interrelated. We show that very much in chapter 1, and it pervades the whole report. It also applies to the issue of informal employment as well. We also show that convincingly in chapter 1, the issue of informal employment being affected by the shocks or the various aspects of climate change. So these are very much issues that are covered in the report. I don't want to take much limelight here. I want to hear much more from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ben. I want to bring the question of inequality to each of the panelists. We know that inequality intersects with climate vulnerability. It would be more interesting to hear from you, how do we address the vulnerabilities that are intersecting in the context of climate change? David, can I start with you?
Thanks, Paula, for that question. One of the things which is intellectually challenging and rewarding in producing this type of report is trying to engage with some of the concepts and ideas that are coming through by people who are thinking quite deeply and making them meaningful and relevant and trying to improve practice. So I think one of the things that we deliberately tried to do was not spend too much time documenting the inequality of climate impacts, but more to use concepts like justice and the way the climate justice is being developed as a concept, to think about the inclusion in decision-making processes, to think about the outcomes of policies and programs and how those can be assessed, thinking about equity and justice as they exist over generations as well as within societies. So we've tried, and I think there are some strong statements, I spotted this one around the need to negotiate resilience with communities rather than impose it on them. So the word inequality isn't there, but the thinking about how using ideas around equity and justice can be played out in practice is very much there. If I comment briefly to avoid coming back to Lucy's question, and preposterous thinking is exactly the sort of idea that we should be engaging with. We did look a lot at innovation, and that was a framing that was used. But there was also a very strong sense that innovation for its own sake was not necessarily what we wanted to pursue, because innovation can itself have unequal outcomes. And so we tried to examine and think through what sort of innovation, whether it's technological or institutional and governance innovation, but also to try and assess the longer implications if we look through what that leads us to.
Thank you, David. Hannes, I'm coming to you on how do we address these overlapping inequalities and vulnerabilities in the context of climate change?
I mean, I would say that what we also reflected on, I mean, I was not one of the report writers, right? But during the process of development, we were reflecting heavily on, from an accessibility perspective, right? Because we believe that some dimensions of the vulnerability we see in communities today are caused by existing barriers. And that when we are imagining that we take actions which are a form to, combat climate change, etc., and to also be there to lessen the barriers, because that's how we can also decrease vulnerability. We might believe that the investments we make are also addressing the inequality we see in society, but the question we always have to ask ourselves, who are we designing this for? Who are we designing it with? And I believe that, I talked about before the disproportionate impact on persons with disabilities, but of course that intersecting with the underlying structural inequalities and extensive discrimination and the group of persons with disabilities in intersecting with other groups are facing on a daily basis. So these are just making the situation worse for so many who, as I said before, who are facing barriers on a regular basis. I think in regards to innovation, it makes some brilliant points on social innovation, stressing the importance of, it's just not to innovate for innovation's sake, but also to reflect more on the broader purpose of the innovation, so that it do have a strong social inclusion consideration at the very core of innovation. Yeah, I will end there.
Thank you. I think very clear and powerful points. And I will go to Honorable Mayor of Banjul. You face these issues on a day-to-day basis, the vulnerabilities that are intersecting, whether it's gender, whether it's income, whether it's informality in the context of climate change. How do you see this challenge, and what can break these intersections?
Thank you once again, Madam Moderator. I think my position was very, very clear as a mayor, a sister, a mother, and a leader taking care of the capital city when we sit here and talk about climate justice, it's for me like we're in a kindergarten learning A for apple and B for balloon. And this is the truth, simply because, let me quote what I just wrote. My position when we talk about justice at the center of effective urban climate action, as I said, despite my city contributing minimally, let me underline that, to global emissions, Banjul faces several climate threats. So why are we a victim? Why? Why us when we are contributing zero? So where is the money? Where is the equality we are talking about? So for me, we should talk about injustice, not justice. Because this is like, I'm sorry to say this is like a club. You are in the good books, you receive what you have to have. You are there as a poor, developing country, you are out of the world map. So we cannot get a solution with that. The professors have done what they're supposed to do. We have our Bible, we have our Quran. Now it's for us to implement. It's a decade of action. We are tired of the talking. Our people are dying. We are local government, for God's sake. And who is local government? It's you, she, our children, our mothers. We are us, local government. And climate action cannot be solved without local solutions. It's impossible because we are the one feeling it. And this is why I always say we have to think local and learn global. So learning is what we are doing now. So when we go back, we have to implement the action. But how can you implement actions when you don't have the resources? And again, when I talk about resources, I am not only talking about money. Capacity is part of resources also. So local government, we want to be feel. We want people to understand that we have the solution. We are with our people, nearer to them, know their problems, not from the up. So let's start thinking local. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Extremely powerful, extremely real, coming from the ground, your day-to-day experiences as a leader of a city. I want to break protocol and go to the Honorable Mayor of Kingston to follow through from the reflections of the Honorable Mayor of Banjul.
Thank you. I want to concur with what the Mayor from Banjul had said. So I'm in total support with her views. Having not read the report as yet, to be precise, but I've listened to the general view and I've seen where this report is building capacity. At the same time, it speaks to making cities resilient, not just also cities, but communities. And the general feeling I'm getting from the report is that it is rich in data, so it has the potential to build the capacity of local authorities. And as the mayor had said, so it is one avenue of building capacity. I'm hoping that this report will more, not hoping, I should say, I'm hoping that in actually implementing this report, it will be more focused at the cities level and community. As a result, you will have more interaction getting from your mayors, your local, your councils, and also your community. Thank you.
Thank you again for those reflections. Hearing what this means for local governments, local leaders, is really very important. And I want to come to you, Professor Archer, on your reflections, the intersecting inequality. So how could we think outside the box?
I think what is so enriching about the report and the utility of the report in terms of assisting us to think outside the box is that we have some concrete examples. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, because you find that in the past, the mayors from Kingston or Banjul or from Pakistan or wherever, that they operate in silos. But here in this report, we have highlighted some very useful examples that if you're considering whether, in terms of taking actions, there are places elsewhere that would have considered, and we are submitting to you in this report. Here are some examples. You don't have to follow in, direct prescription, but here are some consideration for action. So they are outlined in the report, because the issue of inequality would have been considered, whether it's in Banjul, whether it's in Kali, whether it's in Bakuk or wherever, whichever city or towns, we would have considered. Here are some examples that we would have studied and are saying to you, consider this in terms of applying and taking actions to address a similar situation in your community. So that's how I see it addressing. We just did not just say, yes, there are inequalities, or yes, impact is such. We are giving some concrete examples as to how we can take action.
Thank you so much. I just want to bring together a few ideas. You have heard from the panel, the report is out. It is action focused. So if you're looking to understand better and design action for climate, the report provides that. It is also a roadmap for policy design, whether it's urban planning or otherwise. It provides new data and concrete examples that you could draw on. You can use it in your negotiations and engagements around climate change. And also, it could be a means of better capacity building. This came from the panel. This is an invitation to you to read the report, to look at the report, and apply it as relevant. So thank you so much to the panel for making that clear to the audience what this means. I now want to invite Ben Arima to share some final reflections and thoughts on the report and the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Edla. I'll just try to touch on a few things. I think one of the most important things about this report and also this roundtable is that how do we translate some of the findings of the report into concrete and implementable action on the ground? If we have a report and we are not able to implement the findings, then that becomes a key issue. And I think the aspect that the mayor brought in is very much, the mayor of Banjul brought in is very much important, that capacity or resources is not only about money. Money is important, of course, but it's not only about money. One of the things that this report has shown is that very often, many reports provide climate solutions, but the implementability of those climate solutions becomes a big problem. We talk about compact cities, we talk about resilient infrastructure. Do cities in different parts of the world have the capacity to implement these? And again, this is where we have to talk about the issue of capacity building, which is very much important. The issue of the usefulness of this report came up. And of course, virtually all chapters of the report are useful. We also have the key findings, and we have a few other booklets, which mayors and other executives who do not have time could read very quickly and have an overview of what the report is all about and how to implement it. Professor Carol Locha spoke about the issue of urban planning and how relevant that chapter is. not only is the issue of urban planning relevant, the issue of multi-level governance is also relevant, because when we talk about climate change, various levels of government, they have different capacities. And at the same time, climate change cuts across jurisdictional boundaries. So again, the issue of multi-level governance is important, and then the issue of each level of governance is also important. Of course, the issue of finance is very much important, and my colleague who worked on the chapter 9 on finance will tell us that cities are only receiving 20%. And as the mayor said, Mayor Banjul said, when the money comes in, it goes through different sources, and by the time it comes down to this local level, they do not have the finances to implement climate action. Again, another thing that this report brought out, and which David said, are we tasking local governments with so many things? Maybe we are. Again, we said you have to improve your credit worthiness. I don't want to mention certain cities, but if you go to certain cities and certain local governments, you don't even have a finance expert there. And if you look at the nature of the horizontal relationship between vertical relationship between local governments and central governments, many times local governments do not have the capacity to leverage necessary finance. So again, we need to address this in a much more realistic way and be able, and again, it's not a case of one cap fits all, but again, situations in various local governments differ remarkably. Hannes brought in the issue of disability, and I think this is very much important. We are going to have the third round of NDCs in February, and it's important that issues of disability and other issues, including stronger urban context, is reflected. I don't want to take much time because I know that this room is being occupied, it will be occupied almost immediately. I want to say that we have copies of this report available. We have a stand, we have a website, we have case studies from 23 cities. Case studies from 23 cities supporting this report. So again, all these are very much relevant, and I want to thank you very much for taking the next past 1 hour to be here and to listen to what we have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ben, for that. Final 3 lines. Help us spread the message. Help to synchronize partnerships. You've heard from different partners here calling for partnerships. And please help us scale action through this report. Thank you for your time, and we hope that you will find the report useful. With apologies, we also would like to, yes, present the report. Ben, please, you go ahead.